Grace to you and peace from God our Creator and Christ our Redeemer. God had warned them. The people longed for a king. They desired to be like the other nations, with a ruler that would fight their battles for them, with a figurehead that would represent their aspirations and their glory. Then they would be respected. Then they would fit into the world stage. But God was displeased. Through Samuel, God warned them what a king would do. God warned them that a king would take their sons to serve in his army and to drive his chariots. A king would put commanders over the people to make the weapons of war and to harvest the fields to feed the army. A king would take their daughters to serve in his house and would take the best of the harvest of the land from them. God warned them that they would cry out to God after they had suffered at the hands of a king. But on that day, God would ignore their cries. But the people rejected Samuel's words of caution. They wanted a king, but God had warned them. It is almost to a T that David fulfills God's warning. Time had passed. The battles of his youth are now behind him, and now David had grown comfortable in power. He continues to wage battles, seemingly as a matter of course, because what else is a king to do? But now David wages battle from the comfort of his home. Millennia before, working from home would become a thing, sending his commanders to lead the battles and his soldiers to fight the armies, while wandering about in his house idly as he awaits reports from the front line. All of this is but a backdrop for what comes next, because as David putters about his house, he spots Bathsheba, and seeing her, David abuses his power and authority over Bathsheba to make her have sex with him. When, at last, the consequences of his abuse come to light, David tries to hide what he has done, sending for Uriah, Bathsheba's husband, from the battlefront, hoping that the man would embrace the opportunity to sleep with his wife. When Uriah does not, out of a sense of solidarity with those who are still sleeping in tents and fighting a battle, David gets him drunk, hoping that inebriation would loosen Uriah's moral fortitude. Still, Uriah does not go down to see his wife, so David moves to plan B and has Uriah carry his own death sentence to the front line, instructing the commanders to ensure that Uriah is killed in battle by the enemy. And thus, David's fall is complete, having killed another for his own evil, having coerced sex with one who could not consent. After all, if you can only say yes, then you cannot consent. And so by his own actions, by his own corruption, David becomes exactly what God had warned would happen. It's a troubling story of corruption and evil, and I'm not sure that there is any good news to be found in it. I'm not sure that there's any good news to be found in it, and this story does raise some important questions. What do we do when our leaders fail us? Because David was not the first person in power. He was not the first leader to fail the people he served, nor was he the last. Because we do not have to look long and hard to find politicians who have abused their power for financial gain or political gain or sexual gain, whether it be from bribes or misappropriation of funds or scandalous affairs. But it's not just limited to political leaders, is it? The Me Too movement showed the world how rampant this abuse is, from movie stars and billionaires to authors and regular old business executives. And perhaps most painfully to us, we know all too well that it extends into the church, from stealing and the pursuit of personal gain to sexual abuse and misconduct. There is something profoundly corrupting about power and authority, and it starts from the misguided belief that they deserve their success, from the belief that power and authority stems from their own merit. And from there, it's only a short leap to believing that they deserve whatever they can take, taking our collective trust and leaving us with a profound sense of betrayal and injustice. What do we do with this betrayal? What is the faithful response to this failure of our leaders? Because it would be easy to give in to a nihilistic despair and anger, throwing up our hands in the air in a preemptive defeat, becoming jaded and shutting down. But that just allows those who have abused their power and authority to get away with it. It is not a faithful response. One thing that we can do is speak the truth to those in power, not allowing what is true to die unseen in the shadows. That's what happens to David when he is confronted by the prophet Nathan, as we will hear about next week. But that is not where our faithful response ends. A faithful response also calls us to listen to those who lack power in the system, whether that is in the political system, the business system, the church system, or within society at large. We are called to watch attentively for where those who lack power are being taken advantage of, abused, and mistreated. And we need to believe them when they tell us that they have been wronged. Too often we are loath to admit that someone we admire and hold in esteem has betrayed our trust, and so too often we dismiss and attack those who accuse them. But the powerful always benefit when we rush to their defense, when we question and doubt and undermine those who say that they have been hurt. What's more, we are called to stop ascribing divine right to kings, and I don't just mean monarchs. We too often believe that this practice is behind us, but we are just as quick today as we were thousands of years ago to proclaim God's favor upon those in power. In fact, we only have to look south of the border to the aftermath of the attempted assassination of Donald Trump to find many people, himself included, claiming that it was a sign of God's favor that he survived. Whether it is political power, fame, business success, or a place of spiritual authority, the position of the powerful is never ordained by God. But most of all, our faithful response means that we must finally heed God's warning about the dangers and the pitfalls of kings. We must finally listen to God's voice, and rather than placing our trust and authority and power into a human who is as broken as any of us, place that trust in God and God alone. For that is always what God has called us to be, God's people with no other above us, placing our whole trust in the one who created all things and calls us to be a blessing to the world.